This is an exclusive presentation of WOWO 1190 AM and 107.5 FM, Unholstered.
Welcome back. Here we go. It is time for Unholstered. Thanks for hanging out with us this weekend. My name is Kayla Blakesley. I'm just one of your hosts here on Unholstered.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sophia Rosales-Catina. I'm a captain with the Fort Wayne Police Department, and welcome back to the show, Unholstered.
Obviously, Sophia represents the side of policing. I represent the side of local media because during the week I host my own news talk radio program here in Northeast Indiana. Sophia, this show is all about us joining forces, coming together to share and tell and talk about all the things that don't often get talked about when it comes to law enforcement. And today's topic, obviously fits right into that fold, homelessness. And I think it's really important, and we won't do it just this second, but throughout the program that you explain particularly the Fort Wayne Police Department's role in homelessness. But I think a better place to start before we kind of really get into the nitty gritty is just, does Fort Wayne, Indiana in general have a homeless problem? We do.
And I think homelessness can probably extend to almost every community in our nation. As time progresses, things have become, and we talk about it on your other show, on your morning show, about inflation and things are happening that way and things are just getting more expensive. Housing has become unaffordable for a lot of people. But what we're seeing on the street level is not necessarily that. What we're seeing on the street level is more of a crisis of addiction, a crisis of mental health. That's where we're seeing, I would say, probably 80 to 90% of our homeless problem. Wow. And that then becomes a problem because they turn to doing things that are then involve us, like criminal activity, panhandling, trespassing, things like that.
So when it turns into this illegal activity, that is when the Fort Wayne Police Department will get involved.
Yes and no.
Okay. So explain that, yeah.
Yeah, so we kind of get involved on a different level. In some of it's criminality because it's could be construed as trespassing, right? So they're on park property or they're on private property, and we have to go in and remove them from that property. We do this in a very systematic fashion. So the police department's notified. Most of the times those calls come to me because my quadrant encompasses all of downtown, which is where we see a lot of the homeless problem. So I initially get the call from a resident complaining or a business complaining that, hey, we've got this encampment and there's a lot of traffic to and from. So then that leads me to believe that there might be some drugs involved. So I pass that information on to our special operations captain, who then coordinates with the city and with our bike patrol to post that we are going to clean this area up. They are trespassing on this area. This area will be cleaned in 1 week. Please vacate and take all your belongings with you.
Wow.
So at that point, when that date comes, then the city goes in and we'll stand by in case there's an issue with anybody that's still remaining, and clean that area up. And a lot of it has to be done with hazardous materials because we just don't know the extent of what that homeless encampment is.
And a lot of times, I'm assuming that drugs are involved.
Drugs are a lot of the times involved in those. Not all the time. There are circumstances where people are just down on their luck. But for the most part, what we see, in at least in Fort Wayne here, with the homeless people on private property and or city parks, is that it's an alcohol, drug, or mental health problem.
But when it comes to the problem, quote problem, I'm using air quotes here, that we have in Fort Wayne. I mean, it's not like what you hear about in California, in San Francisco, or the issues that some of these bigger cities have with it, right? Because, I drive through downtown every single day to and from work. In fact, I drive through downtown right around 3:30 in the morning. I don't traditionally see a lot of homeless people.
They're not usually on the city streets, but what they'll do is they'll occupy parks. They'll occupy the banks along the rivers. They'll occupy private property in some kind of wooded area. We get a lot of calls, vacant lots. Sometimes they'll occupy abandoned homes. So we get a lot of calls like that. So we have to go in and we have to respond to those. But I think sometimes people want to lay that at our doorstep. And it's really not a police problem until it becomes a criminal problem.
I see.
This is a social issue that sometimes we're made to intervene in, but it's really not. I mean, I'll give you this example. As I run social media for the police department, at times when it gets really cold, I'll make a post, telling people where the warming stations are, or in the summer when it's really hot, where the cooling stations are. I get people responding all the time, well, what are you doing about the homeless? I can't do anything about the homeless. Yeah. It's not illegal to be homeless. And I can only step in, and we can only step in when there's a criminal thing or maybe a civil thing that we need to do a report on or something. But homelessness is not the police department's problem. But like a lot of other things, it gets laid at our doorstep, and we're made to take care of the problem.
That's such a good point because, again, from a typical civilian point of view, I don't know why, but it is kind of always assumed, and not just in Fort Wayne, but wherever you live, that it is the responsibility of local PD. But you're right. I mean, if you really sit and think about it, of course it wouldn't be your responsibility unless there's some kind of criminal activity. So then I guess at the end of the day, is it the city's responsibility? Like, whose responsibility is it?
Well, I think it's our community's responsibility, our nonprofits, our city government's responsibility to a point. Mm-hmm. It's also self-responsibility because there are a lot of centers and there are a lot of places where people can go. But there are also, with those places, rules. And a lot of people don't want to abide by rules.
Of course not.
Because they want to do their thing. So like if you go to the Mission, you cannot be high or drunk when you go in there. A lot of people don't want to stop using. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to go there. They're just going to pick up their lunch and they're going to take it and go somewhere else. Because they want to keep on that trajectory of their life. So in some ways, it's their responsibility. In other ways, there's probably not a lot of places to go for recovery that's affordable.
Yeah, good point.
So it's kind of one of those two-pronged problems where it's not affordable for them to seek treatment, but they also have to want to have treatment. So until they want to, it will never kind of balance out.
Do you ever run into this where a homeless person is wanting to be arrested on purpose? You hear this all the time, whether it's true or not. Oh, yeah, they just want to be arrested so they can go to jail and get 3 square meals a day, have a bed and heat or AC, depending on the time of the year. I mean, does that really happen?
Well, I think when I came on, I felt like it happened sometimes because it just, those certain people. But anymore, those charges that they're arrested on are pretty much revolving doors. They're some low-level misdemeanors. They're just kind of booked in, then released. I mean, they're not really held for any length of time. So it's not really a thing.
So that's
anymore.
Kind of a myth to some extent.
To some extent, yes. Unless they're doing something felonious in nature where they would be held.
But does that happen often? Are you running into many of those scenarios?
I don't think we see anything like that. Most of the time, they're just trying to get by, trying to get what they need for the day from someone, whether it's panhandling, which is illegal in the city of Fort Wayne.
It is, that's a good reminder.
It's a city ordinance. Mm-hmm. And then people get upset with us when we enforce it because they don't like the look of it. Well, I don't want someone getting hit on Coliseum Boulevard because that's a lot of semi-traffic, a lot of traffic moving back and forth. I see a lot at Coliseum and Goshen in the old district I used to work. A lot of panhandling going on there because the hotels are there. There's a lot of addiction and chemical problems there, a lot of mental illness in those hotels. Crime is heavy in those areas. And you just see them on the street panhandling. And I see people giving them money. Stop giving them money because they're not using it in the way they said. They're on their little
cardboard sign.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of going to be my next question. Great segue into it. What's your best advice if and when we come up on homeless folks, whether it's panhandling or just sleeping on, along the riverbank, like you said? I mean, do you have any advice for civilians?
Just call us. Let us know where they are. We'll go talk to them. Our bike units do a really good job at making contact with all of these encampments, seeing what they're about, seeing if they need something. Our bike patrol is fantastic. We have 3 gentlemen on days that do that, and they do that primarily. That's their job, 24/7, 365.
No kidding. Let's talk to them.
Yeah, we will do that next week.
Okay.
But they'll go out and they'll talk to these homeless people. They'll talk to people in the parks. They're very friendly. James is just really good at making that connection with people, and people love him. I get so many compliments on all of them when they're out and about. I'll get businesses calling in because they do business checks throughout downtown. So their primary area is downtown, and then we use them for special events as well. So they have a lot of community involvement.
I guess I didn't even realize we really had a bike patrol either.
We do, and it's nice. We have those 3 during the day, and then we have 2 on second shift, and they do the same job as the day shift people do.
Ooh, I would hate that, the second shift. That would be like...
Yeah, and in inclement weather, they're in cars.
Okay.
So they don't have to ride. But, most of the time, if it's not snowing on the ground, even if it's pretty cold, they've got gear on. They'll ride.
That's super cool. Okay, I can't wait that we bring them in.
Yeah, that could be something you could do with your Pelotoning.
Yeah, there
all
you
the
go.
time.
I could ride with them, maybe. Go out on a bike patrol with them. Okay, so this is a real life scenario. And I don't even know if you can answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway because I find this interesting because you mentioned homeless people trespassing, living in vacant homes. So a couple of weekends ago, I was visiting family in Ohio, and a family member of mine is a realtor in Ohio. So I get it, might be different rules, but we can call it Indiana if you want to. But she's telling me this horror story about how a homeless person, when a home went up for the market, the sellers had already moved out. So technically the house was vacant while there were a for sale sign up front, which we see homes all the time. That's basically a big old placard that says, this home is empty a lot of times, She says she runs into homeless people vacating or living in these vacated homes while they are up for sale. She actually said it's a problem that's plagued her for years that she has to deal with. But she said just recently, she called the cops because she usually has to bring the cops in to help remove said person. But she said recently she called the cops, did the whole thing, went there and went inside, and on the kitchen countertop, this person actually had a piece of mail sent there, like was using this location as their address, as their permanent residency. And this family member of mine was like, no, they don't live here. Nobody lives here. I'm selling this home. And the officer said, well, because they actually have a piece of mail that this is identified as their residence, I cannot personally remove them. And so, of course, this family member of mine said, well, what am I supposed to do? I have a showing here in like 3 hours, and there's this person and all this stuff. Basically, the officer told her to camp out, wait for this person to leave, and then go in with a locksmith and change the locks. And that is, in fact, what she had to end up doing. She had to cancel the closing that day, so on and so forth. So the story goes. But I was dumbfounded by that being the solution to the problem. So in this event, if a homeless person has overtaken it, let's just say a house for sale, if they're getting mail there, is there nothing that can be done?
So this kind of goes into the area of civil, but I'm just, I remember seeing some of these stories like in California, where this happens all the time. I don't know what the laws are like in California, so I really can't speak to that. But I'm thinking here, just because you have a piece of mail sent there, I get what the officer's saying, because we run into this problem a lot, right? So we have people that cohabitate together, right? One person has the lease of the home, and then they invite their boyfriend or girlfriend to come in. They're living there for a couple of months, and then they get in a fight, and I want her out or I want him out. But they're getting mail there. They have clothing there. They've been there. So our kind of the way we do that in that instance is, are they getting mail there? Does it look like they've been here? So has it just been a day? Okay, if it's just a day, okay, I will make you leave. But we've also had that instance happen, and we can't do anything because they've been there. They're getting mail there and everything. But I would think, but in my mind, they were invited to that residence, right? You just don't get to go cop a squat in an abandoned building and call it your own,
right? Because
you send a piece of mail there. I could be wrong. I don't know. It sounds like a civil issue, but I would probably make them leave because you weren't invited by anyone who has ownership in this property to come here.
Right.
You just can't just automatically show up and say, oh, this is mine. I don't think people are like squatters' rights, and I don't think that's a thing in Indiana. I've never heard of it in 28
Wasn't
years
that
of
wild?
policing. But no, I totally get what they're saying because it happens all the time out on the West Coast.
So are we seeing here in Fort Wayne, I want to use this home for sale sign scenario, does that happen a lot? Because and I'm not, obviously not all homes that are for sale are empty at that time.
Yeah.
But oftentimes they are, at least,
Yeah, we haven't seen it in homes like that, that are for sale. What normally we see it is houses that have been condemned. Then we'll see people go in and occupy those homes because they're boarded up and everything. They'll take the plywood down. But because we have city ordinances, they can't stay there if it's been condemned. So we have the authority then to remove them with neighborhood code.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How do we, Sophia, end this problem? I mean, what are some good steps to take? I mean, because again, the FWPD, y'all see it all the time. You see it way more than anybody else probably in this community, maybe with a few city officials, I suppose. But I mean, you're there, you're on the streets, you've got a whole bike patrol practically dedicated to it. I mean, when you're getting all this information, is there a solution to this problem, I guess?
I think for me, the solution is going to be that we have better mental health facilities and better recovery facilities. But at the same time, we also have to have the people with the self-responsibility to actually seek the treatment. Until they come to a point where they're rock bottom and they can't function, we see then that's when they turn. But what is rock bottom for someone?
Right.
I don't know.
We all have different definitions probably.
Yeah, and our heart team goes out. They work a lot with the homeless encampments because we see a lot of addiction, a lot of overdose. So they'll make contact with them. They'll try to get them into treatment. They'll try to get them into resources. But again, they have to be willing to accept those things, and they have to be willing to move forward in a positive way. And at some point, a lot of these people just aren't at the time we're meeting them. So I don't know what the answer is, honestly, other than, having more facilities for people to go to. But here's where we're seeing another issue with this is we have a tremendous amount of resources here in Fort Wayne. We are very, very fortunate to have the amount of resources we have. There are people that come from all over just to use our resources. And that becomes a problem too, because people know that. So we get a lot of people like from DOC when they get released from Indiana State Prison. You get to pick anywhere in Indiana you go.
Really?
And they have to take you there. So Fort Wayne's got a really good reputation of having a lot of resources, and we're a very generous city, and so a lot of people come here.
Huh.
We see a lot of new people, and it's not just DOC. Don't think it's just former prisoners coming, but it's just a lot of homeless people come here because we have the tremendous amount of resources, and we're such a giving community.
So it's kind of a catch-22. I mean, it's great that we have the resources, but at the
other
same
hand,
time, we are attracting a lot more homeless folks or what have you because we have the great resources.
Yeah, and I think the mission was saying they were seeing anywhere upwards between 20 and 30 people a day that they just had not seen before. And it goes in cycles. Summertime always.
So I was actually just going to ask that. Yeah. I'm assuming, so we're in the spring, we're about to get into the summer. Do you start to see a rise in homelessness during the warmer months? And obviously the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think we just see them more out and about. And I don't know where they go in the winter time because it gets really cold here at times.
Yeah, it does. Bitter cold.
Yeah, and we have the warming stations and things like that, the rescue mission. And they try and do a good job. And where we're always finding where we're behind the eight ball is in women's housing for homelessness. We don't have a lot of facilities for women. We have a couple for women and children, but single women, we don't have a lot of facilities here. And especially in the emergency department, like there's emergency housing, because a lot of times we'll come up and it's not necessarily a domestic violence issue. It's just they're upset and they need to separate. Or I've had one case where a lot of people meeting on the internet, and then they come with their children and move in with someone, and it doesn't work out within like a day or two, and they're booted out. And now what do we do with them? It's not a domestic violence situation, so we can't go to the shelter, but there's nowhere for women and children on an emergency basis to go.
Are there a lot of homeless women and children? I guess I don't know why. This is shame on me, but when I think of homeless population here in Fort Wayne, if and when I do see homeless people, it's almost primarily middle-aged males. Yeah. Is that not really the case in terms of its gender and age?
It's predominantly male, but there's a lot of women and some children. A lot of times the children will get scooped up by social services before the female hits the street. It's just how it goes. We seem to always have a place for the kids, which is great, but at the same time, we need the mom taken care of too. So where can we go to place these women? And there's just not a lot of places because it's such predominantly male driven. There's not a lot of female places. So we're trying to brainstorm as community relations on our department with our chaplain service, with Fort Wayne churches to see if we can come up with some kind of solution.
So the FWPD is actively trying to conjure up some kind of
we're trying.
Okay, solution to the problem.
Yeah, and it's just
That's
something
cool.
because we're concerned. This is a problem for our officers, and as a community relations captain and DC McKinney, as the deputy chief over community relations, we really try to help our officers with what their immediate needs are. So what they tell us they need, women's emergency shelter, then we'll go out and we'll see where can we go, who can we talk to get at least the ball rolling, at least get the conversation started. This is what we're seeing. This is what we need, because our officers need this. A lot of times our officers are just paying for hotels out of their own pocket for these families. And we don't tell those stories a lot.
Well, gosh darn it, we should tell them here on Unholstered at least.
But it happens, and it happens with great frequency. We have a very generous police department. Our officers are amazing people. And, are they all that way? No, but a lot of them are, and will pay money out of their own pocket to ensure a family at least has a safe place for the night.
That's beautiful.
But we can't, it's not sustainable.
Right.
We
That's
can't
not the
keep
answer.
doing that. Yeah, it's not the answer. So we don't know what is, but we know we at least have to have the conversation started.
You've been on the force with the Fort Wayne Police Department for almost 30 years. I always hate to date you sometimes, but it is also really important for people to understand your resume.
Yeah.
You've worked in several departments. You've worn a lot of hats within the Fort Wayne Police Department. But with that being said, do you feel like over the last almost 30 years that something contributed to this homeless problem, that we're kind of slowly but surely seeing it on the rise? Is there something that we can point to as to the why that is?
Me as a personal person coming on this show, and I think it's kind of hard to differentiate sometimes, but I will say it's probably, I would say, a rise in mental health cases, which then leads a lot of times to addiction. We can always look back, and we would talk to addicts, and we do that a lot with our heart team. They go out there and they talk to these people. There's always some underlying precursor of mental health that got them started with the drugs. Whether that's depression, anxiety, ADHD, something was going on before they started on this path of addiction. And I think that the growing number of people that are addicted to something in this country is growing such an astronomical rate.
Yeah.
And there's just nowhere for them to go because their families get weary of being lied to, of being,
stolen from.
And disappointed. And then, we've had people on before, like the last thing you want to do is to have your addict son or daughter in your home and find them dead. So we've had 2 prior addicts, both Tommy Streeter and Nate Mollering, say that. So a lot of people do, push their loved one out the door, hoping that that's maybe a rock bottom so they get help, but that doesn't necessarily happen, and they still stay on that path of addiction, and then it becomes cyclical, right? So you just get enough to get your high for the day, and then it just starts up the next day.
I'm curious, and I'm probably catching you off guard. Normally you are our stats gal, but I know that you didn't bring any with you. I don't see you, at least your big stack of papers like usual. And so I don't know if you know this or not, but did we see a rise in homelessness during the pandemic? Because you talk about even just domestic violence. We heard a lot about that where women and children were locked inside these homes that they really should not have been locked in. In other scenarios, not just that, but did we see the numbers go up or down during the pandemic in terms of homelessness?
I don't think we saw them move in any direction really significantly. Maybe afterwards, as everyone, it seemed like the economy kind of tanked there for a bit, and people didn't have jobs anymore, but there was a lot of government money coming in, but did they use the money the right way? That I don't know. In terms of how we're doing here in Fort Wayne, every year we seem to have an increase of who we're making contact with in the homeless area. So I would say that the numbers are rising, not at a rate of Seattle or Portland or something like that where it's San Francisco, where it's like a problem. I think our city officials do a good job of trying to tamp it down and trying to help and trying to direct people to resources. But again, they have to be willing to take those resources and follow the rules that they have.
Man, what a challenge.
It's a huge challenge. And I just want people to know that, we're empathetic to the problem, but we still have a job to do. And when you see us out there trying to do that job, it's not like I want to toss someone out of their tent and make them go but there's certain rules you had to follow, because if it was your property that they were on, you wouldn't want them there.
Exactly.
So just keep that in
a lot
mind.
Different. Yeah, and if you've got a solution, we'd love to hear it, because that's just it. People always want to say, it's an FWPD problem, or it's a city problem, a community problem, which, yes, as a community as a whole, yes, it is a problem that we have, but I'm all ears for solution. I think every single city in the country would be open-eared to solutions. If someone's listening right now, Sophia, and they want to help support the Fort Wayne Police Department, or they want to know, because you just said it, your community relations team is trying to find a solution to the problem, do you know how people could get involved or learn more or help support you guys in this really challenging endeavor?
Well, I would say first look to the nonprofits here in Fort Wayne that are actually doing stuff with the homeless. There's Just Neighbors, I think. They have like a truck that goes out, and they do tremendous work. And there's churches that do ministry and check on the homeless, make sure they have what they need. They make sure the women are as safe as they can be, because we know that at these homeless encampments, when there's women there, there's a lot of sexual crimes that are committed against women and against their will. And sometimes they do it just to stay there. So it's a problem too then when it comes to that. So there's just so many things that happen.
We start with the nonprofits and the churches.
I would start with your church.
You got the heartbeat.
If you don't have one of those, then find a nonprofit that's actually doing stuff in this community and get out there and help them. Yeah. Get out there and meet these people. And maybe just befriending them, you can be the voice that they need to hear to make positive choices in their lives.
Next week, we'll learn more when we talk with the Fort Wayne Police Department Bike Patrol. Who knew? This is primarily the problem that they get to deal with. That'll be next week here on Unholstered. In the meantime, you can listen to any of our previous episodes by downloading the Unholstered podcast anywhere you download a podcast. Your town, your team, your topics. This is Unholstered.
Thanks for listening to Unholstered. Be sure to subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you listen. And remember, you can listen every Saturday morning at 10:30 on WOWO 1190 and 107.5 FM.
Podcasts by Federated Media.